It would be no exaggeration to say that Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later pretty much redefined the landscape of horror movies when it released back in 2002, launching the career of Cillian Murphy, reinvigorating what had become a tired and played out zombie genre, and showing that movies like this could actually still say something interesting about the fragility of society and human nature. And it was all done on a minuscule budget of just $8 million. Damn man, that's probably more than they spent on catering for the trash coming out of Marvel and Lucasfilm these days.
It's never too late to stop being a dick.
The 2007 sequel, 28 Weeks Later, was a surprisingly good follow-up that answered some of the questions posed by the ending of the first movie and continued the story in a way that felt like a logical progression. Yeah, it wasn't as viscerally compelling and hauntingly tragic as the original, and it didn't have quite as much to say thematically, but overall it was a solid, effective, and fairly conventional sequel. The only problem is that it cost almost twice as much as the first movie and made $20 million less at the box office, which left it kind of dependent on home media to turn a profit. That's right kids, there was a time when physical media sales could actually make the difference between profit and loss for a big movie. Damn, I feel old. Anyway, plans for a third film were well underway by the time 28 Weeks Later came out, and all the main players were up for doing it, but the project soon ran into creative and rights issues that would leave it trapped in development hell for the next 15 years.
Fuck.
Jesus, this thing makes A Song of Ice and Fire look like a model of creative efficiency. How's Winds of Winter coming along, George? What's this year's excuse for making less progress than a World War I infantry assault? Anyway, time heals all wounds, as they say, and by the year of our Lord 2024, the project was finally moving forward again, with Danny Boyle and Alex Garland returning. And a couple of days ago, we got the first trailer to whet our appetites. And holy fuck, it actually looks pretty good. You know, producing trailers that show you just enough to get you intrigued and excited for a new movie without blowing their creative load in a desperate attempt to grab your attention is a real lost art these days, and 28 Years Later is a perfect example of how to do it right. What we get here are snippets, just a few seconds at a time, that paint a picture of the world as it is now. No dialogue, no overdramatic voiceovers, no obnoxious effects-riddled action scenes, just snapshots of what's coming. And the choice to use the poem Boots by Rudyard Kipling as a basis for the soundtrack was a neat choice, perfectly capturing the grinding and repetitive nature of survival in this new world. Every day the same routine, the same constant fear and vigilance needed to stay alive, the same struggle to hold on to your sanity in a world of constant danger and death. The basic premise is that it's been almost 30 years since the rage virus broke out and plunged the UK into a devastated post-apocalyptic nightmare world where survival is a brutal, desperate struggle day to day. Kind of like living in present-day London, if I'm honest. Anyway, scattered groups of survivors have managed to band together to form primitive communities, holed up in heavily fortified villages to protect them from the infected that are apparently still on the prowl. I mean, the ending of the first movie suggested that since they lack the intelligence to properly feed themselves, they'd eventually starve to death and go extinct. Nice to see Ariana Grande taking on more challenging roles after Wicked.
You've taken that too far.
From what I can tell though, the virus has evolved to the point where the infected have now developed the most basic and rudimentary intelligence, kind of like Glaswegian teenagers, allowing them to survive and use low-level cunning and even tactics to go after the human survivors. It reminds me a bit of George Romero's Land of the Dead, where the zombies are starting to show signs of organisation and leadership by the end, implying they might one day become more than just walking corpses trying to eat your face. And I suppose it makes sense when you consider our own recent experiences with global pandemics that seem deadly and terrifying at first, but gradually become milder and less dangerous over time as our bodies adapt to them. The other possibility is that humans themselves have started to act more like the infected as a way of coping and surviving in a world gone completely insane. If you've ever read World War Z, there's an interesting little anecdote about uninfected humans who snap under the pressure of a world collapsing on itself and start acting like zombies as a psychological coping mechanism. A kind of, if you can't beat them, join them mentality. I mean, it doesn't work out too well for them, and they end up either getting eaten by the zombies or gunned down by the military, but it's interesting all the same, and I wonder whether 28 years later might be playing with similar ideas. Either way, I have to admit that I'm excited to see where this particular movie goes, especially if it finally gives us a conclusive ending to the 28 Days Later storyline. I want to know more about what this world has become nearly 3 decades after the outbreak, what human society looks like now, what the wider global situation is, and whether there's any hope of things ever going back to normal. And because it's a movie instead of a TV show, at least we're not condemned to suffering through an endless storyline that'll keep meandering on forever. Unlike some shows I could name.
Really?
Between this and Nosferatu, we might just be entering into a new golden age of higher-minded horror movies made by directors with actual talent and artistic skill. The only fly in the ointment is that it's actually being filmed back-to-back with a second movie, The Bone Temple, directed by Nia DaCosta of all people.
Oh man! Oh god! Oh man!
Fuck me, that's a weird choice. Like, if you're directing 2 sequels back to back, why would you switch directors midway through the process? And why, in the name of all that is good and right in the world, would you swap Danny Boyle, one of the greatest British directors working today, for a woman whose biggest claim to fame is the fucking Marvels? I mean, by all rights, she should be in director's jail for the next 10 years for that travesty. At the very least, she'll be working from the screenplay made by Boyle and Garland, so there's not too many ways she can fuck it up, but still, it just seems like a weird decision, and one that leaves a bit of a sour taste in the mouth when you realise that she'll basically have the final word on the 28 Days Later story. That, however, is a problem for another day. For now at least, 28 years later has got my interest. Let's just hope they can stick the landing. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.